Hi and welcome to another video from GC Mysteries, where this time we are doing one on the cursed flight number 191. Okay, so tonight's video is about a so-called curse or coincidence. At the end I'll let you decide in the comments box, but the story is that the flight number 191 or 191, it is most commonly referred to as flight 191, is cursed, and that is because of how many plane crashes have happened with that flight number. Now, that flight number, or the curse of flight number 191, began in Puerto Rico in 1972 when Prin Air was the flag carrier for Puerto Rico and operated numerous flights around the island and beyond. Now, on the night of June the 24th, 1972, a Prin Air de Havilland Heron was operating the flight number 191 between Luis Munoz Marine Airport, International Airport in San Juan, and Mercedita Airport in Ponce on the south end of the island. Now, due to the flight's poor punctuality, the control tower at Mercedita was closed and the pilots had to declare their intentions on the uncontrolled frequency. Now, as the plane was approaching the airport, the pilots believed they saw an airport vehicle on the runway. So the pilots then executed what is called a missed approach, and basically if they have a missed approach, they usually try to go back around, get back in line with the runway and bring it down again. But the plane ended up stalling above the runway, and the flight proceeded to drop and suddenly crash into the runway. Now, of the 20 people that were on board that flight, 5 were killed, including the 2 crew members. Now, the NTSB initially ruled that the presence of an unauthorized vehicle on the runway caused the pilots to go around and stall. However, 3 years after the accident, the NTSB reopened the investigation when it was revealed the person believed to be the driver of the vehicle had left the airport 15 minutes before the crash, meaning that he could not have possibly been driving a vehicle on the runway. Now, that unfortunately was the start of what is now classed as a curse, and the next flight to fall victim of that curse was one of the most publicised air crashes at the time, and that was in 1979 on a clear May day at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. An American Airlines Douglas DC-10 pushed back from gates K5. The DC-10 was operating flight 191 with non-stop service to Los Angeles International Airport. Now the flight taxied out to runway 32R or 32 right and begun its takeoff roll shortly after reaching the runway. However, during the takeoff roll, things began to go wrong as the airplane reached V1, and V1, if you are wondering, is a point in which the pilots cannot abort takeoff. But as the airplane reached V1, the pilots in the cockpit heard a loud thump, and as they scanned their instruments, they saw that the number 1 engine on the left hand side had failed. But it had not only failed, it had fallen off the aircraft. Now the pilots weren't to know this because they couldn't see the engine or the wing, so they wasn't to know that that engine was no longer present. But they also saw that hydraulic pressure in system number 1, powered by the number 1 engine, had also failed, and that is because of the fact that the engine was not common, it wasn't there, and had basically parted company with the aircraft. Now, to the passengers sitting along the left hand side of the aircraft, and to the people on the ground, the sight was much more terrifying than what the pilots could see, because they could see that the number 1 engine had not just failed, it had completely separated from the aircraft. Both the engine and the pylon assembly attaching the engine to the wing had flipped over the top of the wing. The assembly also ripped a 3-foot section of the leading edge of the wing. Now, the pilots were able to still get the aircraft off the ground in up to a height of 325 feet, but they were unable to get it to go any higher than that, and were still unaware that the engine had physically separated from the aircraft in which they was flying. Now, they followed the standard engine failure procedure and went through the checklist, but obviously none of these things were going to work, and the plane was unable to maintain lift and crashed into a trailer park 4,600 feet from the end of the runway. Now, unfortunately, all 271 passengers and crew on board, as well as 2 people on the ground, were killed when the aircraft crashed. Now, that was the second flight with the flight number 191 that had crashed. Now, the third victim of the flight 191 curse occurred in 1985 in Dallas, Texas. Delta Airlines Flight 191 was flying from Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport to LAX with a stop in Dallas. A Lockheed L-1011 operated the flight with an experienced flight crew at the helm. While halfway to Dallas over Louisiana, thunderstorms began to form in the path of Flight 191, and these storms were common for the hot Dallas summers, and pilots were experienced with their strength. Now, the flight proceeded normally to Dallas, and they began their descent into DFW in the late afternoon, just as the storms were hitting their peak. They descended through the thunderstorms surrounding the Dallas area and lined up for landing on runway 17L, which is now named 17C. As they were on approach, a severe thunderstorm lay between them and the runway, and as the flight entered the storm, they experienced a microburst. And a microburst is a weather phenomenon that causes an increase in headwind, slowing an aircraft down and giving it a severe downdraft, which pushes the aircraft towards the ground, then a strong tailwind pushing the aircraft forward. The L-1011 hit the ground in a field short of the runway and bounced back up into the air. It then crossed a Texas highway at the end of the runway, where an engine hit a car, killing its sole occupant, and the aircraft then bounced into the air again before veering out of control into water tanks on the airport's perimeter. At this time though, the tail section had spun off and ended up in the grass next to the runway. The entire forward section of the aircraft from row 34 to the nose was destroyed in the collision, and in total 137 people of the 163 people on board died in the tragedy. So that was the third Flight 191, and the last one was a Delta connection flight from Lexington, Kentucky to Delta's hub in Atlanta in late August of 2006. Now, this flight was actually Delta Connection Flight 5191, but was operated by Comair as Flight 191. The flight was an early morning flight to bring passengers to connections in Atlanta, and was operated by a CRJ-200, was nearly fully loaded for the early morning departure with only 3 empty seats. Now, once again, this flight did not end well. And of the 50 people on board, 49 of them died in that tragedy. So, is the flight number 191 a curse, or is it coincidence? I'll let you decide that, and I'll let you tell me in the comments section. But my advice, and certainly something I will be doing, is avoiding any flights that have got 191 in the flight number. But if you want to learn more, you can. just by searching Flight 191, and you will find all of the flights that have ended in tragedy with that number. Thank you for watching this GC Mysteries video. If you liked it, please like, subscribe and click the notification bell. If you can, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/GC Mysteries. See us on Facebook and Twitter, GC Mysteries, and bye bye for now.